Hi, welcome to the next channel. So hope you guys are following up my recent video series on doing my own Userspace network stack. As I discussed earlier, the main intent is to make it platform independent and also make it to work all within Userspace. And by saying platform independent, I hope this should able to run on Linux platform, or else let it be FreeBSD, whatever it is. So that's the main intent. So if you have not watched, you can have a look and then you will get some overview. So having said that, last week I was doing some work on the same. I thought let me more prioritize the than the data plane part of the network stack. I thought of prioritizing the management plane and the control plane part. So this is what I have come up with. You can see here. So I'm calling it as the stack rather than calling with some type of toffee variant or something like that. I thought let me name it as stack. So you can see here. So this is the command line interface I came up with. I'm in the process of doing the same. If I type info, you can see here this is the initial version, and I was in the process of defining all that specific rule sets and stuff like that. So this is what you can see here. A few things I have supported. I can do something like show ports. This is quite equivalent to ifconfig, although ifconfig shows various other stuff. I may down the lane support some of them, but may not be the stats and other stuff in this command. So I just want to make myself a unique stack with some sort of inspiration with any standard Linux or FreeBSD network stack, but I want it to make it very unique so that it may give some unique set of powerful features, maybe suited for modern applications. So that's the main intent. Okay, so that's what. So you can see here I can list the ports, and as I discussed in the previous episodes, I want to make it multi-dimensional. So you can see here it has different ports, and these ports can exist into inside any namespaces. Okay, so that's what you can see here. Before displaying any port, it shows what is the namespace it is going to belong, and along with that you can also see the ports. If I do a help, you can see I am supporting this port ID or port name. So in the case of Linux, if you do ifconfig, you get this list, and -a, it is going to display any hidden interfaces. So if you track the kernel's net device data structure, the net device data structure is sort of a linked list, and it is going to have the port IDs along with port names. But for the conveniency for the end user, it is going to show the port names, but in the Linux kernel you will get the port IDs. So sometimes you need to use the data structure using this ID as the context rather than the name. So it is going to be dev name or something like that. So the dev is nothing but struct net device. You can also have skbuff data structure having a reference to net device dev. So skb dev, you can refer its port information through this. Okay, so anyway, the port ID is there in Linux also. I hope in FreeBSD also it is going to be there. It's just a guess, but most probably it is going to be there. So although you have the port ID, it is abstracted in the user space. As you can see here, no one uses the port IDs. Okay, having said, I thought in my stack I make it so visible so that always the port ID is going to be an integral part of that port reference. So it is going to be sort of vice versa. You can use the port name, or else you can use the port ID. So port name can be termed like a sort of nickname of that network port. So that way, if you see, I have supported a couple of other interesting commands. You can see here, show namespaces. In this command, it is going to show various namespaces it has been created. Having said that, as I said, it is still work in progress. I may define some sort of a rule book. It may include how this data plane aspects also is going to follow with respect to this control plane part. So this is what. So you can see here I have different namespaces. I can add any namespaces. I can do like add namespace white and then I can do show namespaces. You can see here it has multiple namespaces. Having said, it has no rule saying that show ports. These two namespaces doesn't have any ports, but I have to make a way that when a namespace is created, it may add the default localhost for that respective namespace as soon as you add the namespace. Similarly, if you delete the namespace, it is going to delete that localhost of that namespace also. So it is always a port linked to the namespace. So in fact, this is what happens in Linux also, but there is no namespace you can explicitly see. Okay. In the case of Linux, if you do ifconfig or something, it is not going to show any explicit namespace, but you have that option. If you do some VRFs, if you do even containers, and in that if you do network namespaces, then you can have that option. But unfortunately, all these things are added as an add-on to that existing Linux network stack. So always you will find that these things are going to exist like an add-on to that existing network stack, rather than bringing all under one roof and having it sort of supporting by default. So you won't get that sort of a look and feel in Linux. Versus here, since it's a custom stack, it is done from ground up, it is done from scratch. I have that freedom, I have that control, I have that complete control to do whatever I wish in this way. Okay, so this is what you have this dummy empty namespaces, but it doesn't have any ports. But I can add a sort of a rule saying that when a namespace is created, it should include also localhost, like you have any network subsystem. Let it be Windows, let it be Linux, or whatever it is, you will have localhost, and then you will have that port physical port references. Okay, so that's what. So you don't have the same here. I can even do delete namespace, delete, I guess it is, del namespace. I can provide the namespace name yellow, and I can provide, or else I can even provide this namespace ID. You can see here even that ID, because when you create, you don't know the ID, but after it is created, you get the ID. So now if you want to do anything, you can do with respect to the ID or the name. So this is what it is. So this is the intent actually. So same way I can do even add port, and I can mention the namespace. I can tell white, or else I can type its namespace ID, and then I can mention any port. But having said, I think this command is not supported. You won't get any output by doing so. Okay, so show ports, as you see, it is not doing anything in the backend. So I have to support that logic. But this gives a fair idea that how this is different than what you are used. Okay, so I want this type of control. See, I was discussing about VRFs in an episode, VRF3 Linux channel. It's a very old episode. I was discussing about VRFs, and I was also discussing the differences between this VRFs and layer 2 VLANs and stuff like that. So when you do that multi-dimensional aspect, as well as this bridge control to do bridging or routing through IP forward in Linux IPv4, or else BR forward in Linux networking subsystem. So when you do all these things, you have this multi-dimensional aspect, you have many ports, and then you have a specific framework. You can attach these ports, you do bridging, you attach these ports, you do routing. Same way, if you do VLANs, you can create a VLAN and then add these ports. Similarly, you can create multiple VRFs and then add the ports to this VRF planes. Okay, so this is what. So this is quite cumbersome in a Linux system, because as I said, the stack is quite old, the networking subsystem, and then all these features are added on top of it. Okay, so that's what it makes it very cumbersome. You need to fiddle around with various commands, but again, each command is like an add-on to that existing stuff. For bridging, you have brctl in Userspace command commands, versus if you want to do some VLANs, you need to do in some other way, versus if you want to do VRFs, you need to do in some other way. So that is why it is not unified. So that is why I want to make this Userspace network stack so that all these aspects are unified, and I can write some fantastic applications on top of this stack. Also, like I mentioned in the first episode or the second episode, I don't want to expose socket like APIs to use IPv4 or IPv4 or TCP, UDP, all these service level protocols. Instead of sockets, I want to come up with some other abstract APIs which is far more simpler. At the same time, it provides whatever options which sockets provides, but it is far more modern and far more abstract APIs, which is user friendly, but it is powerful as well. So I want to come up with some type of approach. So I'm not sure, I need to work on that. And at the same time, the most important part is I need to work on the data plane aspects also. I need to see that how these packets of these ports should communicate, let it be through sockets, internal sockets, let it be through some message queues, or else some sort of shared memory or something like that. Okay, so somewhere if you use shared memory, you get advantage of performance, but the code looks cumbersome and pathetic. But if you use sockets, the code is more easy to manage. I mean to say, the local host sockets or else message queues, the code will be more easy to manage, but you will have that performance overheads. Okay, so this is an architectural decision. This is nothing to do with the baseline abstract, the stack, whatever it provides to the end users. Okay, so that's what. So I need to work on all these data plane aspects, and when it comes to the stack, I can create like this any number of network ports. You don't have any limitation, as you can see here. You can create a namespace, you can create even hundreds of ports per namespace, and then you can link those ports to the actual physical interface. So in case if you want to expose these ports to the external world. Okay, so that's what. So I need to come up with some mechanism that these ports, bunch of ports, or else just 1:1 mapping. I need to do some type of mechanism where multiple ports can be linked to any of these system provided ports. Okay, so you should understand this stack is existing here in the user space, and in whichever way I want, I should able to couple to this Linux stack. So this approach is far different than DPDK, and moreover, as I said, my objective is not to do something which DPDK provides or compete with any existing platform. I want to do this for my own sake, and I want this stack so that I can leverage this stack and write some top level applications. I mean to say any products or something like that. I mean to say not applications means some network applications, let it be even something like Toffee or some type of let it be some firewall, let it be some type of VPN or some type of stuff, network appliance software I can write on top of that, leveraging this stack, rather than using that traditional Linux kernel provided network stack, or else in the case of FreeBSD, whatever FreeBSD gives. Since this gives that entire abstraction, the stack as it is, I can port it to FreeBSD, and whatever I do on top layers, I can use it as it is, because it is abstracting the entire system level aspects, and on top of it, I don't need to use any system level APIs and stuff like that. So the problem is, when you use some networking applications meant for network appliance or something like that, you need to also do some type of system calls, you need to do some system fine tuning and other stuff, where that is where it becomes cumbersome. It is just not writing some socket code or something. Somewhere, either you need to do in kernel space your stuff, or else you need to do your stuff in the user space, and that is quite cumbersome. So I don't need to do with this type of an approach, because all those things are abstracted, and then you have this stuff. So it is more or less, like I mentioned, it is more or less like a microkernel approach, where either you pick some subsystems of what exists in the kernel and expose it to the user space and make it run in the user space and make the kernel more lightweight. I have also an option. I can pick the Linux kernel. I can disable its existing IPv4 stack, and then I can use my stack and then support the applications on top of it. So this is what. So it gives a lot of other opportunities. Having said that, of course, by doing something like that, I can't simply make some Firefox or something to run on top of it. It is not possible, because Firefox is going to use the same, socket APIs. So it needs the traditional, library access. It can't use this. Okay, so this is, of course, it's going to be some limitation, and it's not for everyone. But having said that, the intent of this network stack is to start from ground up, where you can, provide from day one the namespaces, versus in the case of Linux, it is not something existed from the beginning. It is something added as an add-on, and due to that, even recently the netfilter hook APIs in network modules, kernel modules, all these APIs got a substantial change. Okay, so you can't use that old netfilter hook APIs now. The APIs, the parameters have been changed so that it can support this namespace logic. It no longer have the default netfilter hook and then just hooks it into that. You need to select the namespace, and then you need to set which port to get access, and then you can get packets in your kernel module. So that is the reason. So that is why it's been done to accommodate all these modern changes. But now, since networking is fairly mature, I want to do in an approach where I keep all these aspects in space in my design aspect, okay, in the design criteria. And also I need to come up with, like I said, I need to come up with some type of a rule book where I have this, certain things should be defined properly. Okay, so what happens when I communicate from one port of one namespace to the other port of another namespace, versus two ports within the same namespace, or else the port from namespace to the physical port, and stuff like that. So all these things have to be defined. You cannot just like that communicate between two ports without having some type of mechanism. Okay, I mean to say that not the data plane mechanism. I mean to say that you need to have some type of rule book. See, each namespace itself represents its own world. So it is like equivalent to virtualization itself. So each namespace, when you have something like a namespace, it is identical to an individual system with network context. Okay, so this is like container stuff. So, but it is not an entire system container. Instead, it is a network namespace. Okay, so when you have a namespace, when you have another namespace, you cannot just like that, bridge, these two ports and, make it communication or link possible between these two ports of different namespaces. You need to define a rule book, and sometimes when you want to communicate between these two ports of different namespaces, you need to support some type of bridging, and then link this port, and support that communication to and fro. So you need to come up with some type of rule book. If not bridging, you need to do with via routing. If not routing, through some other mechanism. Okay, all these things have to be defined to make it into a full-fledged network stack, okay, so that it can be leveraged when you write any top-level applications. Like I mentioned, you can use all these features with set of extremely powerful abstract APIs, and then use this, leverage this features and write your applications on top of it. Okay, so that's what. Having said that, before even going that level of doing stuff, I just want to have my own personal satisfaction by doing something like that. Once again, I'm saying this is nothing to compete with any existing platforms or else something which is existing like DPDK. As I said, DPDK is an SDK. It has its own set of objectives and things like that, which is not something which I am looking for. Okay, I am looking for something completely different. As I said, this is what I have come up with. I need to see where this is going to take me forward in the future. So before even getting too much deeper into the data plane aspects, which is the most challenging part. I need to solve a lot in the control plane and the management plane itself. As you can see here, even I have not yet supported all the commands. I just did a few things. The code is quite old already. You can see it's done on 21st of March. By now it is 30th March or whatever, so it is already fairly old. I may do work on this occasionally every month, so that I can take it to the next phase. So that's what. So hopefully I may cover about it in the upcoming video episodes in the future. So if you guys have anything to discuss, or if you have any inputs, be in touch via mail or via YouTube comments. Thanks a lot for joining me. Stay tuned. Have a nice day. Bye bye.